You're already dead. Your brain just hasn't realized it yet. Right now, somewhere on Earth, a human heart has stopped beating, while the person still hears voices in the room. Doctors call it clinical death. But here's the strange part. Some of those people came back describing things they should never have seen. And that raises a terrifying question. What actually happens in the moments after you die? Not religion, not mythology, real biological events, real studies, real people who crossed the line and somehow returned. Because death doesn't happen all at once. It arrives in stages. First, your body begins shutting down silently. Your hands grow cold. Your skin changes color. Blood stops reaching the surface. Tiny purple patterns spread across your arms and legs like cracks forming in glass. Doctors call it mottling. But that's only the beginning. Your brain starts losing track of reality. Dates disappear. Faces blur. Words stop making sense. You drift between consciousness and something else entirely. And this is where it gets weird. Many dying patients start seeing people who aren't there. Dead relatives. Bright lights. Strange figures standing near the bed. For decades, doctors dismissed these visions as hallucinations. A dying brain firing random signals. But then researchers noticed something impossible. Thousands of people described nearly identical experiences, even across different countries, different cultures, different beliefs. Peace, floating, warm light, a feeling of being pulled somewhere. How could complete strangers experience the same thing? That mystery became even darker in 1968 when a Harvard medical panel officially tried defining death itself. Sounds simple, right? It wasn't. Because for the first time in history, humanity realized there's a terrifying gray zone between alive and gone. A person could have no heartbeat, yet still return. No movement, yet still hear. No pulse, yet still remember. And suddenly, death wasn't a moment anymore. It was a process. But nobody was prepared for what people would report from inside that process. And that's when everything changed. Imagine lying on an operating table, doctors rushing around you, machines screaming. Your heart completely stopped. Then suddenly, silence. Not darkness. Silence. Now imagine watching your own body from above. That sounds impossible. Except hundreds of cardiac arrest survivors have described exactly that. Some claim they floated near the ceiling while doctors tried to revive them below. Others described conversations happening in the room while they were technically dead. And here's the disturbing part. Several details were later verified. One patient accurately described medical tools used during surgery. Another remembered exact words spoken while they had no measurable brain activity. So what's happening here? Hallucinations? Dreams? Or something science still can't explain? In a major 2008 study, nearly half of cardiac arrest survivors reported some form of awareness during resuscitation. Time slowed down or sped up. Pain vanished instantly. Some described overwhelming peace. Others felt absolute terror. One survivor compared it to drowning in darkness. Another described a golden light, so comforting they didn't want to come back. But that's not even the craziest part. Scientists discovered the dying brain may become hyperactive moments before death. In other words, your brain might become more alive as your body dies. Electrical activity can surge unexpectedly. Memory centers ignite. Emotions intensify. It's like the brain is firing one final burst before shutting down forever. And this creates a horrifying possibility. What if death feels much longer than we think? A few seconds in reality could feel like hours inside the mind. And this is where the entire story flips. Because maybe those near-death experiences aren't random at all. Maybe the brain is trying to protect you. Researchers at St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne studied dying patients who saw comforting visions. Their conclusion was chilling. The mind may create peaceful imagery to ease the fear of death itself. Your brain becomes your final storyteller. It shows you lights, loved ones, peace, anything to soften the fall into the unknown. But if that's true, why do some people experience fear instead? Why do some report darkness? And why do so many survivors return completely transformed afterward? That question led researchers into one of the strangest discoveries ever connected to death. High in the mountains of Tibet, something impossible may be happening. Monks die, but their bodies don't decompose. For days, sometimes over a week. No smell, no visible decay, no normal signs of death. And scientists have been trying to understand why. The phenomenon is called tuktum. Before dying, certain monks enter an extremely deep meditative state. Their breathing slows almost to nothing. Their awareness turns inward. Then eventually, their heart stops. By every medical definition, they are dead, but their bodies remain strangely preserved. And this is where it gets weird. Researchers studying Tukdom believe meditation may somehow keep parts of the brain in a low-energy maintenance state even after clinical death. Nobody fully understands how, but the implications are massive, because it suggests consciousness may not shut off as suddenly as we assumed. Think about that. For centuries, Western medicine treated death like flipping a switch. On, off, done. But what if death is more like fading out slowly? What if awareness lingers? Suddenly, ancient spiritual practices and modern neuroscience are colliding in ways nobody expected. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Have humans misunderstood death for thousands of years? Because nearly every culture on Earth developed rituals around dying. Prayers, chants, ceremonies, meditation. At first glance, they seem symbolic. But what if they were practical? What if people discovered long ago that the state of your mind during death actually matters? And that idea becomes terrifying when you realize something else. Every near-death experience changes people permanently. Some lose all fear of dying. Others become deeply spiritual overnight. Relationships collapse. Priorities change. Entire personalities shift. It's as if they touched something they can't fully describe. But here's the strangest pattern of all. Almost nobody comes back with clear answers. They return with fragments. A light, a feeling, a presence, like seeing only one frame of a much larger movie. And maybe that's because the human brain physically cannot process whatever comes next. Or maybe it was never meant to. But just when scientists thought they were beginning to understand death, another discovery completely shattered the conversation. Because the final moments of dying may not be the end at all. In 2013, researchers made a discovery that terrified neuroscientists. After death, certain genes inside the human body become more active. Not less. More. Some continue functioning for hours. Others for days. Which means parts of your body are still working long after you are supposedly gone. But what happens next changes everything. In animal studies, scientists observed bursts of synchronized brain activity moments after clinical death. The patterns looked shockingly similar to conscious awareness. Your brain may experience one final explosion of activity after the heart stops, and nobody knows what that experience feels like from the inside. Could this explain near-death experiences? Possibly, but it also creates a darker possibility. What if consciousness doesn't disappear instantly? What if the mind remains trapped briefly inside a shutting-down body? Suddenly, death becomes less like a door closing and more like drifting into deep water, slowly losing connection, slowly fading away. And this is where human fear of death truly comes from, not knowing when awareness actually ends. Because despite all our technology, science still cannot answer the biggest question of all. What is consciousness? We can measure brain waves, track neurons, monitor electrical signals, but nobody can explain why awareness exists in the first place. Why does a collection of cells suddenly create a you? And if science can't fully explain consciousness, how can it confidently explain where consciousness goes? That mystery has haunted humanity forever. Ancient Egyptians believed the soul traveled into another realm. Tibetan traditions describe transitional states between death and rebirth. Modern researchers search for neurological explanations. Three completely different worlds, all chasing the same answer. But that's not even the craziest part. The closer scientists look at death, the more mysterious life itself becomes. Because death reveals something deeply unsettling. Your identity, your memories, your emotions, your entire reality, all depend on fragile electrical patterns inside a 3-pound organ. One tiny interruption, and everything changes. Which means the line separating life from death may be thinner than anyone wants to admit. And if that line is already blurry, what happens when humanity starts trying to cross it intentionally? Right now, scientists are actively working on ways to delay death. Not metaphorically, literally. Researchers are experimenting with suspended animation, brain preservation, and techniques designed to keep cells alive far beyond normal limits. Some believe future technology could eventually pause the dying process entirely. Others think consciousness itself may someday be transferable. And suddenly, the question changes. Not what happens after death, but can humans escape it? And this is where the story becomes truly unsettling. Because every attempt to conquer death creates a terrifying side effect. The more we understand dying, the more fragile life starts to feel. Think about it. Your personality is electrical activity. Your memories are chemical patterns. Your emotions are signals. Everything you call you exists inside a biological machine that can fail without warning. One heartbeat away from silence. Yet somehow, despite knowing this, humans continue living like death is distant. Like it happens to other people. Until suddenly, it doesn't. And maybe that's why near-death experiences affect people so deeply. Not because they prove an afterlife, but because they destroy the illusion of permanence. People return realizing life is temporary, unpredictable, unbelievably fragile. And strangely, many become less afraid afterward. Why? Because once they faced the unknown, everyday fears started feeling small. But there's still one mystery nobody can solve. Why do humans instinctively feel there's something beyond death? Across thousands of years, civilizations separated by oceans all imagined some kind of continuation. Different names, different symbols, same instinct. Coincidence? Or something buried deep inside human consciousness itself? Science still doesn't know. Religion still debates it. Philosophy still circles it endlessly. And meanwhile, every living person is moving toward the same unavoidable destination, including you. One day, your heart will beat for the last time. Your brain will fire its final signal. The world around you will continue without pause. And in that final moment, will you see nothing? A light? Someone waiting for you? Or something humanity was never supposed to understand? Because after centuries of research, near-death stories, and scientific breakthroughs, the truth is still hidden behind one final unanswered question. What if death isn't the end, but the beginning of something we can't survive remembering?